Hey everyone, so we are here at Barber Motorsports Park with Weira for the Grand National Finals, and we're hoping that we can do some testing on this motorcycle this weekend. Of course, we've got the V4R Superbike project right here. So far, we've only had two and a half practice sessions, and they were really short, essentially, 10-minute type of deal. And mostly we've used that to just do some testing and sort out some bugs. There's always small stuff with these MoTeC packages that need to be resolved on the first outing, and just really small things like setting proper pin thresholds and voltages and things like that to make sure all of our wheel speed sensors and that kind of stuff are working properly. Now we're good. We still have a small issue with the GPS here. It's working in terms of lap time, but there's some other funny stuff happening that we got to sort out. But overall, the bike is working good. We've made some changes to the strategy and to the overall feel of the motorcycle, and it feels like it feels like a good bike. So what we've got now is today's supposed to be qualifying. This is practice 1, and then practice 2 is going to be a qualifying practice. And frankly, if it keeps raining, I'm for sure not going to ride. So I hope you can understand. I'm not super thrilled about the idea of running this bike in the rain. I've raced for a long time. I've always hated racing in the rain. I've only done it when I was chasing points. It's not fun, it's slow, and the bike is disgusting. And obviously the risk is another consideration. I haven't crashed in the rain, but that's because I was not very good. So hopefully what's going to happen is the weather's going to dry up. It looks like there's a chance of that, and we'll be able to race. And depending on who qualifies, it's very possible I'll be gridded at the back if I don't qualify. There's not a lot of people out on track right now, so I'm hoping that there are going to be others that feel the same way and don't ride in this. So maybe we'll get lucky and we won't have to fight through a bunch of slow people. And then the other thing is I'm trying to figure out how we're going to get the GoPro done. I wanted to put a helmet cam on. I think a lot of people have asked for that. I can't really find an easy way to do it without having like a lot of shit on the front of the helmet, even using like a Hero Session. So I may have to mount one on the front of the tank cover or something like that, but that's something I'm trying to work out. So anyway, hopefully it dries up and we'll have some footage for you shortly. I'll check back in a bit. right, so you saw that bit of that race, and needless to say, this weekend has not been ideal for us on the V4R. Sometimes it goes like that. This is a new bike for us, and what you can probably see in the video that I'm unable to drive off the corner, and I'm losing a tremendous amount of time there, probably 2+ seconds throughout the course of a lap. And I think what it comes down to is that we just don't have a light enough spring. It's amazing. This bike likes really small springs, or at least with the way that I ride, it seems to be going that way. And we've tried some things with damping and preload and stuff, and it's just, some of it was better, some of it was worse, but it still hasn't been resolved. So that was, you know, and the other, launching the thing, Jesus, I've never had such a difficult time launching a motorcycle. Probably should have practiced a few more starts, but the dry clutch just feels very different. So that's something I'm gonna have to get used to. That's okay. I didn't come here this weekend to do really well. We wanted to just get to work on the bike. Electronics are working pretty good. There's a few blip things I'm going to adjust. Some areas where I feel like at certain RPM areas, it's not blipping enough. And sorry about that. And just some other odds and ends, but overall it's working quite well. We've got some sectoring set up, and some we're altering our power, our torque, and engine braking in certain sectors around the track, and I think that's working quite well. So just some odds and ends, and I think this bike's going to be really good. For now, it's just I've got to remind myself that we're just getting started and didn't have a lot of time this weekend. So anyway, hopefully the what you do see was enjoyable. You can see that the bike does handle very well, and once we get that drive issue fixed, the thing's going to be an animal. It's got tons of power and tons of grip. Just got to get that pumping issue resolved, and I think it's going to be really good. So thanks for watching. Okay, so we're back from Barber Motorsports Park, and now that you've seen sort of how some laps went and how our test went, I'd like to comment a little bit more on that. So naturally, we really didn't get a lot of testing in this weekend just due to the bad weather. You know, in general, I don't care for riding in the rain. I think I touched on that already, but yeah, it's not fun for me anymore, and I try to avoid it. I was never any good at it anyway, so but beyond that, at the end of the day, the biggest issue is we really needed to, for sure, change spring, and we didn't have, we went through everything we had, and we still needed to go a bit further, and maybe even damping a little bit on the shock. That could just be something that's specific to our setup, but yeah, it was interesting to see that we really weren't quite in the window that we needed to be in. For sure, I think the bike's going to benefit from having the longer swing arm that we're going to be putting on. And even still, at that point, I expect us to use less. All right, sorry about that. I had a battery go dead. But anyway, at the end of the day, I think the biggest issue is that we needed a little bit less spring, and we just didn't have it. And I poked around the paddock a little bit, and I just couldn't find anything else that was going to be in the range of what we needed. So that's where we were. And I'm sorry, I wish that we could have given you some faster laps on this thing. Unfortunately, being unable to really drive and use the throttle the way I normally would, it really cost a lot of time. But at least you got to sort of see what it's like to be on the thing. I don't think it was the best representation of what the bike's capable of, just because the times were pretty slow. But you know, at least you got to see a little bit of action, hear some sound, and sort of see what it looks like, and see how it works mid-corner and stuff like that, which is pretty decent, I feel. So before we sign off, we do have some things that we're excited to try out. Of course, we use a lot of different suspension components here, and we've tested things from the Öhlins World Superbike stuff, which is what we're using now on the front end of this bike. And we've used the Bituba World Superbike stuff on our ZX10, which is actually pretty good. And now we have a very special fork that I'm going to show you, which is this MoTeC Superbike fork. It's a really nice looking piece. You can see that it has the sort of hollowed out machined bottom that you see associated pretty commonly with the Öhlins World's SBK fork. And what's really cool about this fork is that it uses a closed through rod cartridge, which right now through rod damping is something that in the motorcycle world is largely only available in MotoGP. It's what Öhlins is using pretty much exclusively in MotoGP. We're starting to see a little bit of it in World Superbike. It's something that's been kept kind of quiet, but there are at least 1 or 2 teams using it in World Superbike now, very recently. Another manufacturer, MoTeC, has actually started utilizing the through rod damping system that they have, which is called TRDS. in BSB, but it's something that is sort of a factory program where the parts are provided to teams and then they must be returned to KTEC to be serviced, and they can't be purchased. They're essentially lent. So what's cool about that fork is that we have it, it's ours, and we're gonna just try it and see how it feels. It's supposed to have a very different feel to the other damping systems that we're used to. Whether that's good or bad, we'll see. But I'm excited to try it. I think they look really nice, and it sounds like MoTeC is excited to give us some support and see, give us a proper run and see how it compares to this stuff. The cost of those forks is pretty expensive. You know, they're on par with an Olean Superbike fork, maybe slightly less. So it'll be cool to see. One thing that's interesting about that is they do make that cartridge, essentially the same type of cartridge that's in that SBK fork, and where it'll go into the stock fork tube. So essentially you could potentially install that damping system in your OEM fork. Be a lot less expensive. I think that's like $2,500 or something like that. So anyway, that's something we'll test and we'll give an honest evaluation and work on a bit. We really love Oleans. We have excellent support from those guys. Needless to say, the product is world class. So, you know, I don't think that in any way we're interested in necessarily replacing the Oleans products that we're using, but we like to compare things and see how they stack up, and sometimes we're pleasantly surprised, as with that Bitubo fork. Something that we can't buy, and something that we were basically just lent just to test, but it worked very well. We were really happy with it. So it'll be cool to see how this stacks up, and especially being an entirely new damping technology, well, it'll be cool to see how it compares. So that's something we're going to work on next. Obviously, we're going to try to work on our setup on this bike to get rid of this pumping issue. We actually do have a shock as well from these guys. I'll show you what that looks like. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to use this anytime soon because we have some other things in the works, but this is the shock. This is their factory shock. Nice piece as well, but just something, again, I'm not sure when we're going to be able to try this out. It's pretty light, which is kind of interesting. These are really popular in the CIV series. The Ducati V4R over there that wins everything runs this stuff, not the forks because they're not legal, but the cartridge that's in these forks and this exact shock absorber. So I'm pretty beat today. I'm actually, it's incredibly fatiguing trying to ride a bike where you're having really bad pumping issues, where I don't know how much it's going to be obvious in the video. I watched some of it and I can see it, but I don't know how clear it is. There's for sure times where the bike basically felt like it wanted to pitch me off. Anytime I opened the throttle even half as aggressively as I would normally try to get to the thing, it just felt really aggressive, especially if there was elevation involved. There was just a lot of movement, and so it was just really fatiguing. So by the end of that race, I was just dead. My neck and my back is just completely exhausted today from just trying to wrangle that motorcycle. So yeah, I think I'm going to sign off and call it for this video, but I want to thank you guys for watching. If there's anything you want us to do in the next one, or if there's anything you'd like us to cover, please mention it. There is one thing I want to touch, speaking of that, before we close this out. We've had some people ask about ECU technologies and what makes one ECU more powerful than another ECU and that kind of thing. So their ECUs are, they work kind of like computers in that there can be actual physical hardware advantages in terms of processing power, memory, and cooling even, that play a role in how powerful an ECU is. But the bigger impact is going to be the nature of the firmware that is in that ECU. So when I've mentioned that previously, something that I just want to touch on is that essentially the firmware dictates the performance and the capability of the ECU. So we have, for example, on this bike right now, an M1-30, and we have like an open Superbike firmware on there that is really capable and powerful, does all kinds of cool stuff. And in theory, we could actually do even more. And then that same ECU is capable of running the Moto America spec firmware, which takes away a lot of that power. It eliminates all sectoring and some more advanced controls. The physical ECU is identical. It's just that the firmware is far more capable in our open firmware. So that's just something I wanted to just kind of briefly touch on. We may go into that more later, but it was just a question that we were asked and I wanted to answer. So anyway, I think that's going to be it. If you like what you see and you want us to keep producing this content, be sure to comment and like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.